5 Golden Age Hollywood stars who were the biggest fools. Behind the glitz and glamour of old Hollywood, some stars made choices so wild they're still unbelievable today. They had fame, money, and talent, but lost it all through arrogance, obsession, or pure foolishness. From reckless spending to ruined legacies, these are the shocking stories of Hollywood's biggest fools. 1. Judy Garland, the star who couldn't escape her own spotlight. She was born Frances Ethel Gum in 1922, a small-town girl with a thunderous voice that could stop hearts. By the time she turned 13, MGM had discovered her, and Hollywood had begun its relentless grip. To the world, Judy Garland was the girl who sang, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," a symbol of innocence and magic. But behind those bright eyes lived a storm of control, exhaustion, and pain that would eventually consume her. From her very first day on set, Judy's life was dictated by studio executives. They decided her meals, her clothes, even her sleep schedule. When she was tired, they gave her pep pills. When she couldn't sleep, they gave her sedatives. MGM's young star wasn't treated like a person, she was an investment, a product designed to shine, no matter the cost. The pressure was unbearable. Studio bosses called her fat, forced her into strict diets, and tore down her self-esteem until she doubted her own worth. She performed under blinding lights, pretending to smile while living in a fog of fear and medication. Fame became a golden cage. Her 5 marriages were desperate attempts to find love and safety, but each ended in heartbreak, betrayal, or despair. Even after MGM cast her aside, Judy tried to rebuild her life. Her concerts were electric, a haunting mixture of power and pain. She sang not just with her voice but with every wound she carried. Audiences adored her, yet she was crumbling inside, battling debt, exhaustion, and addiction. In June 1969, at only 47, Judy Garland died alone in London, her heart and body giving up after years of abuse. Her death wasn't simply the end of a star, it was the final note of a song the world had played too long. Judy wasn't foolish, she was fragile. She gave everything to a world that took it all. Her story remains Hollywood's most painful truth, that even the brightest light can be destroyed by those who fear its shine. 2. Errol Flynn, the handsome rebel who destroyed himself. He swung across the silver screen with a sword in his hand and a grin that made audiences melt. Errol Flynn, the ultimate swashbuckler, the dashing hero of the adventures of Robin Hood. Born in Tasmania in 1909, he became one of Hollywood's most magnetic stars, the man every boy wanted to be and every studio wanted to own. But behind his charm and confidence hid a storm of recklessness that would one day destroy him. Flynn lived fast, faster than anyone around him. He loved women, danger, and alcohol more than fame itself. He once said, "I like my whiskey old and my women young." That quote, bold and careless, became the summary of his life. Off-screen, he was always chasing thrills, parties that never ended, scandals that never stopped, and debts that piled higher than his fame. His arrogance often clashed with studios, and his wild lifestyle made him unreliable on set. In 1942, his reputation took a dark turn when he was accused of statutory assault. Although he was acquitted, the scandal never left him. Hollywood's golden boy suddenly became its cautionary tale. Studios grew cautious, roles declined, and his charm began to fade into exhaustion. His reckless habits worsened. Alcohol and drugs became his closest friends, while his health deteriorated rapidly. Once athletic and invincible, he grew frail, restless, and paranoid. The man who had once embodied youth and adventure became a ghost of his former self, trapped in the ruins of his own fame. By the late 1950s, Flynn was nearly forgotten. He died in 1959 at only 50 years old, his once glorious career buried under scandal and regret. Errol Flynn wasn't stupid, he was brilliant and fearless. but he mistook chaos for freedom. He had everything: talent, charm, and opportunity. But he wasted it all chasing a life that could never satisfy him. 3. Bela Lugosi, the vampire who couldn't escape his own curse. When Bela Lugosi first stepped onto a darkened stage in the 1920s, his deep Hungarian accent and piercing eyes sent chills through audiences. In 1931, he became immortal as Dracula, the mysterious vampire who defined horror forever. Overnight, he was a legend, but that fame would become his greatest curse. Lugosi wasn't just playing Dracula, he was becoming him. Born in Hungary in 1882, Lugosi had already built a respected European stage career before escaping to America after World War I. He barely spoke English, but his charisma broke through language barriers. Universal Pictures saw his potential, and Dracula turned him into an international sensation. However, Hollywood quickly trapped him inside the coffin of typecasting. He was never seen as anything else but a monster. While his rival Boris Karloff found diverse success in films like Frankenstein and The Mummy, Lugosi's opportunities dried up. Desperate for roles, he accepted low-paying horror films and even parodied himself. His pride kept him from asking for help, even as his money vanished. Pain and frustration pushed him toward morphine, a prescription at first, then an addiction that consumed him completely. By the 1950s, Bela Lugosi was broke, forgotten, and dependent. He lived alone, surviving on cheap horror projects and fan events. His final films, including the infamous Plan 9 from Outer Space, were tragic echoes of a once great artist. He wore the Dracula cape until the end, both as costume and curse. In 1956, Bela Lugosi died penniless in Los Angeles. At his request, he was buried in that same black cape, the one that had made him famous and destroyed him. His story is both terrifying and heartbreaking, proof that Hollywood can give life to dreams and drain them dry. 4. Montgomery Clift, the genius who fell apart. He was called the most beautiful man in Hollywood, a soft-spoken rebel who could break hearts with a glance. Montgomery Clift wasn't like other stars of his time. He was quiet, deeply emotional, and obsessed with truth and acting. Alongside Brando and James Dean, he helped create a new style of performance, raw, human, and painfully real. But unlike them, Clift's brilliance came with a shadow that slowly consumed him. Born in 1920, Clift began on Broadway before conquering Hollywood. Films like A Place in the Sun, From Here to Eternity, and The Misfits made him a critical darling. He refused to be controlled by studios, choosing quality over fame, a rare move in the golden age. He was intelligent, disciplined, and deeply sensitive. But behind the confidence was a man battling loneliness, confusion, and guilt. In 1956, his life changed forever. Driving home from Elizabeth Taylor's house, Clift crashed his car into a telephone pole. The accident shattered his face. Taylor famously ran to save him, pulling teeth from his throat so he could breathe. The damage was repaired by surgery, but the mirror told a cruel truth: he would never look the same again. Hollywood, obsessed with beauty, turned away. Painkillers and alcohol became his escape. His performances grew erratic, his health declined, and his once brilliant spark faded into sorrow. Friends called his final years the longest suicide in Hollywood history. He isolated himself, haunted by what he'd lost, not just his looks, but his confidence and joy. Montgomery Clift died in 1966 at just 45, alone in his apartment. The coroner called it a heart attack, but everyone knew it was heartbreak. Clift's tragedy wasn't stupidity, it was perfectionism. He gave everything to his art, but couldn't forgive himself for being human. His story reminds us that even genius can crumble under the weight of its own reflection. 5. Howard Hughes, the billionaire genius who became Hollywood's dumbest recluse. Howard Hughes was one of Hollywood's most fascinating, and tragically foolish, figures. At first, he seemed unstoppable. A billionaire, a filmmaker, and an aviation pioneer, Hughes produced classics like Hell's Angels and The Outlaw. He dated some of the most glamorous women in Hollywood and owned the skies with his revolutionary aircraft designs. But behind that genius was a mind crumbling under its own pressure. As his fame grew, Hughes's paranoia began to dominate his life. He locked himself in dark hotel rooms for months, surrounded by tissues and milk bottles, refusing to touch anything for fear of germs. He ordered movies to be rated endlessly, wasting millions just to fix scenes no one else cared about. His obsession with control extended to people, firing entire teams over the smallest mistakes. In one absurd moment, he spent millions buying a single movie theater just so no one else could see the film he hated. The man who once ruled Hollywood ended up a prisoner of his own mind, a billionaire too scared to open a door. By the end, Hughes wasn't just eccentric, he was lost. He weighed barely 100 pounds, his hair and nails uncut, living in secrecy. What began as brilliance ended in madness. The tragic irony? Howard Hughes had everything: power, money, genius, but not the wisdom to save himself.